Okay, we have discussed on physical development as well as cognitive development. In this section, we are going to look at socio-emotional development. And in particular, we are going to look into two subtopics, which are socio-emotional development in infancy, which will focus on temperament and attachment. And later, we are going to look at Erikson's theory of socio-emotional development. So before we begin, what is socio-emotional development? Okay, we always hear that when we talk about socio-emotional aspect, okay, socio-psychological aspect. So socio-emotional is refers to process involve changes in a person's social relationships, emotional life, as well as personality. So it related to how interpersonal relationship with others surrounding us, as well as our own emotional life, okay, aware of our emotion and how we express or keep our or regulate our emotion, as well as personality development. Okay, in infancy, people believe that infancy have not yet developed their personality. Hence, to look into social-emotional development in infancy, researchers focus on two important ingredients of social-emotional developments, which are temperament as well as attachment. Okay, what is temperament? Temperament refers to an individual's behavioral style and characteristic ways of responding. Okay, how do we respond? What is our style in responding? What are characteristics of an infant's response to others, response to new people, response to new environment? Okay, for infants, temperament centers on their emotionality, okay, on their emotion and ways of reacting to stimuli in the environments. Okay, ways to reacting to people, ways to reacting to new environment, ways to reacting to new things in their environment. Okay, so there are many different ways to look at a temperament in infancy. Okay, one of the most famous ways is based on Chess and Thomas, which categorize three types of temperament among infants. Okay, one is easy child, second, difficult child, and third, slow to warm up child. Okay, beside these categorizations of types of temperaments, other researchers look from different dimensions. Okay, in this dimension, they look at the degrees of the dimension high or low. Okay, in this perspective, degrees of different dimensions, researchers look at effortful control, or some would call it as self-regulation dimension. Okay, they look also into inhibition dimension, and they also look into negative affectivity dimension. Okay, let's look at one by one. Okay, socio-emotional development in infancy, the three types of temperament which have suggested by Chess and Thomas 1997. Okay, they identified three basic types of temperament in children. The first one is easy child. Okay, the easy child generally is in a positive mood. Okay, they quickly establish regular routines in infancy and they easily adapt to new experiences. Okay, as the name stands, these types of children or these type of infant are easy to look after. Okay, it's easy for their parents to send them to caregivers or to nursery because they are easily or they are readily to adapt in a new situation with new people and new environment. The second types of temperament is the difficult child. Okay, in contrast to the first type of temperament, easy child. Okay, the difficult child tends to be fussy and tend to cry frequently, and they engage in irregular daily routines. Okay, you cannot predict what they like, what they want to play in every day because there is no basically trends in this difficult child. Okay, they are very attached to their parents and very difficult for them to adapt to new situation and to new and meeting new people. And the third types of temperament is the slow to warm up child. Okay, slow to warm up child. Okay, this type of child has a low activity level. Okay, they are not really active. Okay, they tend to withdraw from new situation and is very cautious in the face of new experiences. Okay, they don't really active, they're not playing around so much, and they choose to withdraw, don't join other children to play, okay, don't interact with new people that they meet, and they are very cautious when meeting new people. Okay, like I mentioned before this, another perspective that researchers look into infancy temperament is based on different dimensions. Okay, what is meant by degrees or different dimension here? For each dimension of what we're going to discuss after this, they look into whether the infants have high or low for each dimension. For example, the first dimension is effortful control or self-regulation. So in this perspective, researchers look at how the infants control their arousal and they are not being easily agitated or easily provoked or easily getting angry in this sense. Okay, they can regulate their emotion in their own way because remember this is only infant. So from these self-regulation dimensions, researchers look whether infants have high self-regulations or low self-regulations. So in this sense, it doesn't mean that if you belong or high in self-regulations, you will not have inhibitions or negative affectivity. Basically, all infants will have some sort of tendency for all type of dimensions. It's just that for each dimensions, whether there is high degrees or low degrees of this dimension in themselves. Okay, the second dimension is inhibitions. Okay, these are characterized by being shy or showing distress in an unfamiliar situation. So again, researchers look at whether the infants will have high inhibition or low inhibition. Okay, it can also be combined with self-regulation. And the third dimension, which researchers and developmental psychologists focus on in infant, is negative affectivity. Okay, how they look at the tendency to be frustrated or to be sad. Okay, affectivity refers to feeling and emotion. Negative refers to negative feelings or negative emotion. Again, researchers look whether this dimension, okay, negative affectivity, whether infants demonstrate high negative affectivity or low negative affectivity. Okay, so that's the first part of socio-emotional ingredients in infant. Okay, we look at temperament. Another ingredient, the second ingredient of socio-emotional developments in infant is researchers look into infant's attachment. So what infant attachment means is basically the close emotional bond, okay, the close emotional relationships between infant and its caregivers, okay, be it caregivers or parents. Infants, in this sense, need warm social interactions to survive and develop, okay, emotionally and socially. They need a closer and warm emotional bond with their caregivers. Okay, in this sense, when they conducted research among monkeys, okay, they found out that instead of feeding, contact comfort, okay, contact comforts between caregivers or parents is crucial to the attachment of an infant to its caregivers. So they believe that infants need comfort, need to feel secure, okay, in terms of their contact and relationship with their caregivers. Okay, the infants and the mothers instinctively form an attachment, okay, similar to other animals. Okay, our early relationship with our caregivers are internalized and serve as our schemas to our sense of self and the social world. Okay, basically, these bonds, okay, are basically ingrained in ourselves, okay, internalized. Infant experience set the stage, okay, their experience in terms of their bonding with the parents, okay, their attachment, set the foundation, set the stage for future relationships, okay, not only between parents and the infant, the children, including relationship with others, okay, people in the environments, as well as romantic relationship as an adult. So attachment, okay, infant attachment with their parents and caregivers are very important. Attachment during the first year provides an important foundation for later developments in their life. Okay, Iceworth devised the strange situation test to measure children's attachment. Okay, they used this test and they found out there are three types of attachment: secure attachment, avoidant attachment, and anxious attachment. Avoidant attachment, also known as dismissive attachment. Anxious attachment, also known as preoccupied attachment. Okay, let's look at one by one. Okay, the first types of attachment that we can observe in infant is secure attachment styles. Okay, infants that have this attachment style, they use the caregiver as a secure base for which to explore the environment. Okay, they will always depend, goes back and rely on their parents, on their bonds with their caregivers in order for them to explore their environment. You can observe these types of infants that have secure attachment styles. In some situations, infant in this style is upset when the parents or when the mothers leave, but they will calm down and they will show happiness, appears happy to see the mother when the mothers return to them. Okay, so at first they are upset, but then they calm down. Okay, infants who are securely attached are more likely to have mothers who are consistent, who are responsive and accepting, and who express affections towards them. Okay, show them warm relationship, loves and care. So this is the characteristic of mothers, that their children have secure attachment styles. On the other hand, you can also observe avoidant attachment style in infants, okay, or known as dismissive attachment style as well. And insecurely attached infant, okay, they avoid the mother. Okay, they don't want to be the caregivers of the mother, or is ambivalent. Okay, ambivalence towards the caregivers, ambivalence towards the mother. In some situation, these infants might not even notice if their parent is not there. Is the parents or the mother or the caregivers gone? So they not even notice that they are not there. Okay, so these are the second types, which is avoidant or dismissive attachment style. The third types of attachment style is preoccupied or anxious. This style, you can observe infant with these styles responds with immense distress. This where you can see that infant show temper tantrums when their parents are not present. When their caregivers are not present, they show intense distress. They cry and then they show tantrum. Only, okay, to rage at the mother when she returns. Okay, when they are left to the caregivers or to the nursery centers, okay, to caregiver centers, they will show intense distress. However, when their parents goes back to them or the caregivers goes back to them, they show anger, okay, rage at the mother when she returns. Okay, so that is for the socio-emotional developments in infancy. So we have discussed on temperament as well as attachment. So next, in socio-emotional developments, we are going to discuss about Erikson's theory of socio-emotional developments. So Erik Erikson is one of the most prominent figure when discussed about socio-emotional developments. Erik Erikson generated one of the most important developmental theories in the 20th century. So he proposes 8 psychosocial stages of development. And in each of these stages, each stage represents a developmental task with 2 possible outcomes, okay, in each stage. And he named those 8 stages with all of those 2 possible outcomes. So in this figure, please pay attention in the last or at the last columns of this mind map. Okay, the middle column is basically the categories that I try to make use or to ease our understanding. So what Erickson proposed are the 8 stages of socio-emotional development. The first one, trust versus mistrust. The second one, autonomy versus shame and doubt. The third one, initiative versus guilt. The fourth one, industry versus inferiority. Fifth one, identity versus identity confusion. 6, intimacy versus isolation. 7, generativity versus stagnation. And 8, integrity versus despair. The reason why I group the first 4 stages under childhood, because all of these 4 stages happen during childhood stage or childhood period. Only one happened in adolescence, which is identity versus identity confusion, and 3 involved in adulthood. Okay, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, as well as integrity versus despair. Okay, let's look at one by one. Erickson's theory of socio-emotional developments in childhood involved, like I mentioned before, the first 4 stages of his theory. Okay, the first one is trust versus mistrust. Okay, at this stage, infants, okay, or during infancy, from birth to 1.5 years, or some would say to 2 years, is concerned with establishing trust with the social world. Okay, they are only concerned about establishing trust. Okay, that's why we can see how they develops or they demonstrate temperament and attachment in this particular stage. At this stage, the infants depends on caregivers to establish a sense that the world is a predictable and a friendly place. If they have this sense of predictable and friendly place, they would develop trust. Okay, without a sense of trust, the child lacks a firm foundation for social relationships. So at this stage is whether they are able to develop trust or they are unable to develop trust, they will develop a mistrust towards the surrounding and the environment. Okay, the second stage in infancy and childhood is autonomy versus shame and guilt. Okay, during toddlerhood, okay, between 1.5 years to 3 years, children are going through toilet training. Okay, at this stage, they experience the beginnings of self-control. Okay, when these young children experience control over their own behavior, they develop the capacity for independence and confidence. So if they are successful in developing independence and confidence, they will develop autonomy. Okay, on the other hand, if they don't, if they are not successful in developing independence and confidence, so they will develop shame and guilt. Okay, the third stage in Erickson's theory of social development is initiative versus guilt. Okay, initiative versus guilt. In early childhood, okay, between the age of 3 years old to 5 years old, preschoolers experience what it's like to forge their own interests and friendships, and at the same time try to take on responsibilities. Okay, these are the age whereby our younger brother or younger sisters or our children are sent to preschool. Often, the child at this stage wants to help with whatever their parents, their caregivers, or their older siblings are doing. Okay? When they experience a sense of taking on responsibility, these children or these preschoolers develops initiative. Okay, otherwise they may feel guilt or anxious. Okay, the last stage, okay, the last socio-emotional development stage in childhood based on Erickson theory is industry versus inferiority. Okay, this is more or less involve people at the age of 6 years old until they come to the stage of puberty. During middle and late childhood, children enter school and starting to gain competence in academic skills. Okay, children find that this is the time Okay, this is the period of the time to get to work, okay, to learn, okay, to achieve and to learn to enjoy learning, okay, being independent, what we call as industry. If they fail to do so, they will always develop negative affection, okay, negative emotions. In this sense is inferiority. Okay, one of the most important aspect of socio-emotional developments in childhood is parenting. Okay, beside what we have discussed about Erickson's 4 stages of socio-emotional developments, another important factors that attract the attention of developmental psychologists are parenting. Okay, so there are 4 parenting styles: authoritarian, authoritative, neglectful, and permissive. Let's look at one by one. Okay, authoritarian parenting. Okay, what is authoritarian parenting? This is the type of parenting style which are strict, punitive style. Okay, the parents are high in disciplinarians. Okay, the authoritarian parents limits as well as control the child with little verbal exchange. Okay, they are basically do's and don'ts. There is no gray areas, there is no explanation. Basically, you have to follow everything. The authoritarian parents might say, you do it my way or else, or my way or the highway. Okay, so children of authoritarian parents, sometimes they lack social skills. Okay, they show poor initiatives and they compare themselves with others. Okay, this is the socio-emotional effects that will be experienced by children who their parents are practicing authoritarian parenting. The second parenting style is authoritative parenting. Okay, please do not mix between authoritarian and authoritative. Students usually confuse between authoritarian and authoritative. Okay, easy way to differentiate: authoritarians equal to disciplinarian. Okay, so for authoritative parenting, they encourages the child to be independent. Okay, parents with these styles, they encourage independent, but still they place limits and control on behaviors. So it's not fully or total independence of freedom. Okay, there are still limits, there are still controls on the children behavior. This parenting style is more collaborative. Okay, this is more collaborative. Extensive verbal give and take is allowed from this perspective of parenting. Okay, and parents are warm and nurturing towards the child. Okay, they are not too strict or they are not too lenient. An authoritative father might put his arm around the child in comforting way and say, this is example of the communication, you know you should not have done that. Let's talk about how you can handle the situation better next time. Okay, this is example of conversation between authoritative parents with the children. Children of authoritative parents tend to be socially competent, self-reliant, and socially responsible. Okay, the third parenting style is neglectful parenting. Okay, neglectful parenting. So neglectful parenting is distinguished by a lack of parental involvement in the child's life. Okay, basically they let their children behave or do whatever they want to do. Children of neglectful parents might develop a sense that other aspects of their parents' lives are more important than they are. Okay, children whose parents are neglectful tend to be less competent socially. Okay, they are less competent to handle independence. Okay, and they become poorly independent persons. Okay, they are basically depend on others to solve their own issues. Okay, they especially show poor self control. Okay, when I was growing up, I always listen that parents who are too busy with their careers, sometimes they have problematic children. Okay, their children are delinquents or they have problematic behaviors. Why? Because they don't see or communicate or talk with their parents. in many sense. Okay, when they are wake up in the mornings, the parents already go to works. When they go to sleep at night, the parents are not yet coming home. Okay, the last type of parenting style is permissive parenting. Okay, permissive parenting. So permissive parenting places few limits on the child's behavior. Okay, it's not like authoritarian or authoritative. Okay, few limits. A permissive parent lets the child do what he or she wants to do. Okay, give a pretty much freedom, okay, to the children. Some parents believe that this is the false understandings of parenting. Okay, some parents believe that the combination of warm involvement and few limits will produce a creative, confident child. Okay, this is the misunderstanding of permissive parenting. However, children with very permissive parents typically rate poorly in social competence. Okay, they are not basically able to develop their social skill. They often fail to learn respect for others. Okay, they expect to get their own way. Okay, they always want others to follow them. Okay, to accept their decisions. Okay, to follow their opinion, and they have difficulty controlling their behavior. Okay, these are the children with the parents that are having permissive parenting style. Okay, so those are the four first stages of socio-emotional developments from Erikson theory. Okay, so we have discussed four aspects that Erikson explained, as well as another important factors in childhood developments, which is parenting. So in this section, we are going to continue discussing on socio-emotional developments in adolescence. Okay, in adolescence, whereby at this stage, the main concern is for adolescents to develop their identity. So Erikson's view the key challenge of adolescents as identity versus identity confusion. Okay, in seeking an identity, in trying to develop and establish their own identity, adolescents must find out who they are, okay, who they want to be, who they really are, okay, what they are all about, and what they are going in life, okay, who do you want to be. If at this stage, they do not adequately explore their options, their potential, who they can be, their identities during this stage, they emerge confused about who they are. So those who fail to resolve this identity crisis, okay, do not know who they want to be, who they are, they will become confused, okay, suffering what Erikson called as identity confusion. Okay, so this identity confusion is expressed in one of the two ways. So either when they confuse about who they are, about their own identity, they will result into withdrawn. Okay, they withdraw from the society, withdraw from the social setting. Okay, isolating themselves from peers, from family, and from others. So basically, they do not get involved with social events, with gathering, and etc. Okay, another manifestation of people who have identity confusion, they would most probably lose themselves in the crowd. Okay, meaning that those who do not have identity, who are confused about their identity, they will just go with the flow. Okay, go with what publics want them to be. Okay, they lost their sense of self in a particular situation. So either way, if they have identity confusion, it's either they withdraw or they lost themselves in the crowd. Okay, so this identity confusion, okay, identity development has received quite a number of attention from researchers. Okay, Marcias, for example, he tried to explain identity status that adolescents will experience when they want to look for their own identity. Okay, Marcias develops theory of identity status. So Marcia described two dimensions of adolescent identity status. Okay, in order for us to understand at what stage we are in terms of our identity developments, we can explore two dimensions. One is exploration, another one is commitment. So what is exploration? Exploration refers to a person investigating various options. Okay, various options for a career and for personal values. So basically, exploration refers to the efforts, to the process of trying to find out who we want to be. Okay. On the other hand, commitment refers to our efforts. Okay, it's involved deciding which identity path to follow and personally investing in attaining that identity. So basically, commitment here, we decide who we want to be and we put on effort, we put on commitment to achieve who we want ourselves to be. So various combination of these two, exploration, finding out our option, our alternative, and commitment, deciding on our identity. Various combination of these, exploration and commitment, give rise to one of four identity status. So basically, Masya introduced basically when we want to develop, establish our own identity, we will go through either one of these status. Identity confusion, identity moratorium, identity foreclosure, and identity achievement. Okay, so the first one, identity diffusion. So what is identity diffusion? When people having this status of identity development, basically there is no exploration or no commitment. Adolescent at this stage has neither explored nor committed to any particular identity. Okay, adolescents experiencing identity diffusion have not confronted with the crisis of identity. Why? This is early on. They do not care about who they want to be or what they want to work, okay, their career in the future. Okay, so that is the first status. The second status is identity moratorium. Okay, this is not moratorium of bank when you are having COVID-19 before. So identity moratorium refers to someone or adolescents who explore what they want to be, what they can be in terms of career, in terms of their moral values, but they have not committed, they have not choose yet who they want to be. They just explore, they just look for options, they should look for alternatives. So the adolescents at this status is actively exploring and trying on new role, but has not committed to a particular identity yet. Okay, the third status, identity foreclosure. Okay, commitment without exploration. Adolescents at this status, okay, at this stage, adolescent has committed to a particular identity, but has not done so without actually exploring his or her option. So their perceptions are limited, their exposure are limited. They decide who they want to be, but they do not explore what are other alternative options that they can be. Okay, for example, when teenagers just adopted, okay, just decide to become like their parents, okay, to become like their teachers, or to become like their older siblings, okay, even they have not explored what are the things that they actually can do. Okay, this is identity foreclosure. And the last identity status introduced by Masya is identity achievement. Okay, so this is the highest status whereby people have fulfilled and decided on their identity when they are committed on their identity after they have explored all potential possible options of identity and career that they can develop. Okay, after exploring the options, after committed to one identity, the adolescent emerge with a sense of his or her own values as well as principles. Okay, a sense of the kind of person he or she wishes to be, and goal commitment that provides the adolescents with life feeling, life purpose, and life objective. So this is the highest status where people already or adolescent already clear with their identity, with what they want to be and who they want to be. Okay, so this quadrant is provided in your textbook, and it's quite easy for us to understand the four status based on this quadrant. the upper row is basically commitment. Okay, the column is basically the exploration. Okay, so here the first quadrant. Okay, the upper on my left. Okay, the upper your upper right. If you have committed and explored your alternatives, so you have achieved identity achievement. Okay, on the other hand, on the upper right or upper left, okay, your left, okay, if you have not achieved or you have not decided on any identity and you have not explored anything, so basically the lower one, identity confusion. Okay, if you have explored but you are not committed, so basically there is identity moratorium. Okay, if you have decided but you have not explored, there is for identity foreclosure. When we talk about socio-emotional development, which we relate on the identity development in adolescence, there is another factors that also influence one's decisions, process, and commitment to develop their identity. Okay, which is culture. Okay, identity within a larger culture. So basically, our identity, even adolescent identity, are affected by the cultural messages that they receive in their setting. Okay, what are the cultural values? What are the norms? Okay, what are the traditions in their setting? And all of these influence their decisions, okay, their commitment, and their efforts to explore their identity. Okay, and in particular, it's quite challenging when if you are coming from a minority groups or marginalized group in a big culture. Okay, for examples, in Malaysia, we have three big ethnicities. For example, Malay, Chinese, and Indian. But at the same time, we have Bumi Putras. Okay, we have group of orang aslis which are minorities. So when they want to establish their identity, so they will be facing challenges. Why? Because they have two culture, which we call as biculturalism. Okay, can be a challenge. Why? They have to decide on to take on cultural values, norm and tradition of their own small or minority group, but at the same time try to embrace the values, the norms, and the traditions of the bigger groups. Okay, culture as Malaysians, culture as Malay, or culture as Bumiputra, for examples. So the issue of biculturalism refers to the refers to identifying in some ways with their ethnic minority groups and in other ways with the majority culture. Okay, sometimes along the way, the adolescent lose or lost their sense of self because they have to decide whether to be in their minority group or to be in the majority culture. Okay, so beside this cultural influence, most important aspects in developing identity as well is parents as well as peers. Okay, a key parental role is effective manager. So manager here does not refers to positions while working. Manager here refers to the role of parents who locates informations, make contacts, help to structure, okay, benefits of choices, okay, limitation of choices, limitation of options, and provide guidance to adolescents when they want to explore about their own identity, who they want to be, who they want to work when they grow up. Okay, parents help adolescents to avoid the drawbacks, to avoid the pitfalls, and to work their way through the decisions they face. Okay, to give them moral support, okay, and advice. So peers, in this sense, okay, also influence decisions and efforts, okay, exploration and commitment of adolescents to decide on who they want to be, okay, their identity. Okay, peer relations peak in importance and can have both positive and negative influences. If you or the adolescent have good peers, good friends, so they can guide and help them in developing their positive identity. Okay, the vice versa, if he or she are growing up in the surrounding with negative environments, negative neighborhood, okay, so the toxic environment will also lead to someone deciding on negative identity. Okay, so that is important socio-emotional development process in adolescence, which we focus on identity versus identity confusion. So after that, when we enter adulthood, if you remember, in adulthood, usually we discuss 3 stages of development, okay, which is early adulthood, middle adulthood, as well as late adulthood. However, when developmental psychologists discuss about adulthood from socio-emotional development perspective, they also include in one another developmental stage, which we call as emerging adulthood. But you will not find any other aspects of development, physical, cognitive, that talk about emerging adulthood. So what is emerging adulthood? Emerging adulthood is the period of transition, okay, the transitional period from adolescence to adulthood, okay, where developmental psychologists explain that it's between the age of 18 years old to 25 years old. Okay, so this is the stage whereby people are growing up, okay, moving away from being adolescents to become mature adults. Okay, so when discussed in emerging adulthood, there are 5 key important features that people identify is very crucial in the development of socio-emotional perspective. Okay, these key features was identified by Arnett. The first one is identity exploration. Okay, like we mentioned on the identity status, okay, we have 2 dimensions, exploration and commitments. So it's happened quite a lot in this emerging adulthood. Especially, they are exploring in terms of their life relationship, okay, or their love life, as well as their career and work. So in these times, people are exploring about their love life as well as their career. Second important key features is instability. This is the period of high instability among emerging adulthood. Okay, late adolescence or early adulthood. Why? At these times, there is a big changes or frequent changes in terms of residential, in terms of love, in terms of career, as well as education. So a lot of changes or frequent changes happen during these 18 to 25 years of age. The third important features is self-focus. Okay, this is the time where people at this age focus so much about themselves, high autonomy, little social obligation. So they don't really care much on what happened in the society or in their community, but they pay more emphasis on their own self-career development. Okay, duties as well as commitment to others are quite low in this sense. Okay, so little social obligation, social duties, and commitment to others. So most of the times they focus on themselves, high self focus. Okay, another key features is feelings in between. Okay, so this is the stage between 18 to 25 years of age when late adolescents or early adulthood think that they are basically neither adolescents nor a full-fledged adults. Okay, so they cannot be happy-go-lucky like teenagers, or they cannot become so serious of adults. So this is the in-between period of changes. And lastly, this is the age of possibility. Okay, this is an important age whereby adolescents and young adults have the opportunity to transform their lives, okay, from normal to extraordinary, from bad to good. Okay, this is the time where it requires them to have optimism, optimistic thinking, as well as positive direction. So that is basically important social emotional developments in early or emerging adulthood. Okay, coming back to the early adulthood. So this is the stage when Erickson explained that early adult or young adults will face the issues of intimacy versus isolation. Okay, the sixth stage of Erickson socio-emotional development. So this intimacy versus isolation refers to the challenge of forming intimate relationship with others or becoming socially isolated. Okay, basically this is the stage whereby people start to have partners, okay, life partners, spouse, or getting married. So instead, if you fail to establish your intimate relationship with your partners, this is where that you might probably end up single or isolated. So Erickson described intimacy as both finding oneself as well as losing oneself. Okay, why? When you decide to get married, for example, so you are deciding that you will decide on the rest of your life. Okay, who will accommodate, who will be with you for the rest of your life. So you are finding yourself in that sense. But at the same time, when you decide to get married, for example, you are basically decides to share your life with the person. Okay, share everything. Okay, about your secrets, about your developments, your social status, your financial status, your career. You now not only living for your own self, but you living for your partner and you living for your family. Okay, at this stage, if the young adults develops healthy friendships, okay, and healthy intimate relationship with wife or husband, okay, intimacy will likely be achieved or you will achieve intimacy. On the other hand, if you fail to have good friendships, healthy friendships, positive friendship, and you have toxic or negative family or marriage, then you will most probably end up isolated or socially isolated. One key way that young adults achieve intimacy is through long-term relationship with romantic partner. Okay, usually translated as a marriage. Okay, so when we talk about marriage, developmental psychologists also look at the trend of marriage in our current life, okay, in this globalized era. Okay, marriage and family. So it's very important aspects or social events that happens in one's life. Okay, today adults attachment or relationships takes a variety of forms. Okay, even though I talk about marriage just now, we can see the trends, maybe not in our culture, in other cultures, whereby people have intimate partners. Okay, people have boyfriends or girlfriends, they live together and sometimes to the stage that they have children together, but they are not yet married. Okay, this is a phenomena from psychological perspective. We call it as cohabitation. Okay, they live together, and this trend is basically increasing in other culture. Okay, marriage often happens much later than as compared to in the past. So people getting married later. Okay, even for the cohabitations partners, they live together. Okay, they share everything. They have children, but sometimes they themselves decide to get married later in their life. Okay, why? So that's we leave it to them. Okay, so Gottman has identified four principles that basically establish or lead to successful marriage. Remember, when you've learned in your history and philosophy psychology, you will come across midlife crisis. Okay, when people during their towards their middle adulthood, they will experience midlife crisis. Midlife crisis usually happens in either one or both, okay, which is crisis in marriage as well as career crisis. Okay, now let's focus on marriage. Why? Because nowadays a lot of couples have problems, okay, marriage problems. So this is basically a general guidelines of Gottman when he discussed a successful marriage must have these 4 principles. First one, nurturing fondness and admiration. Okay, the problems of couple, okay, marriage couples, they have the highest levels of love, care of their partners before marriage, okay, during this love relationship, okay, when they are not yet secure, okay, the partners. When they get married, after some times, they no longer show the same intimate feelings, care, and love towards their partners, okay. From Gottman perspective, you need to always nurture those feelings, okay. Don't let it decline or lower down after you get married. Always have admirations towards your partner. What happened now? Okay, during your love relationship before marriage, basically you don't know anything about your partner. When you got married, you started to see the bad side, the dark side of your partner. So instead of having admirations, you are developing negative thoughts about your partner. Okay, second principle, turning towards each other as friends, okay, not as enemy. The problem with couple nowadays, they always keep secrets from their partners and always share everything with their friends. Now, try to make your partner as your best friend, that you can share everything, that will provide support to you and you will provide support emotionally to him or to her. Third principles, giving up some power. Okay, like I mentioned, marriage is a relationship of give and take. Okay, you earn something and you also have to give something, and you also to give some of your power. Nowadays, decision on your life does not only lies on your hand. Okay, you need to consider the opinion, the input of your partner as well, your husband or your wife. And lastly, solving conflicts together. Okay, like I mentioned before, when I have to deal with marriage crisis, most of the times it involves break up in communication. Okay, the partners no longer talk between each other. They cannot talk. Whenever they want to discuss, their partners basically avoid or put on tantrums, always blaming other factors. So it's very difficult for them to sit and to think properly on how to solve their own problem. Okay, so one important principle of successful marriage is solving whatever problems that your family have together. Okay, solving conflict together. Okay, so that is the important socio-emotional developments in early adulthood. Next, let's discuss on socio-emotional developments in middle adulthood. So we just look at the emerging adulthood as well as the early adulthood. So what happened in terms of our social developments when we reach the age of 40 to 50 years old? Okay, we will come to the next phase of development, which is middle adulthood. So in this aspect, Erickson discussed about the issues of generativity versus stagnation. So what is generativity? Okay, generativity means that creating something of value that will benefit future generations. Okay, if you remember about Maslow hierarchy of needs, okay, the highest level of hierarchy that people can achieve is self-actualization. So you can understand generativity in this aspect. Basically, people are approaching, or basically people are achieving self-actualization. Okay, generativity, creating something of values that will benefit future generation. Okay, a generative person feels that he or she has left a lasting legacy, okay, a lasting influence, a lasting contributions that help the next generation in an important ways. Okay, they have positive contribution, and these these feelings that people have in middle adulthood, has made a lasting and memorable contributions to the world and is related to higher level of psychological well-being. Okay, when you are able to achieve generativity. On the other hand, the feeling of having done nothing or not contributing anything, wasting the first 40 years of your life, for example, this will generate the feelings of stagnation. Okay, the feeling of having done nothing of value for future generation is stagnation. Okay, midlife adults, okay, adults in middle adulthood can also experience generativity through mentoring, volunteering, as well as active in politics, political activisms. So this is the stage whereby people will have the crisis of generativity versus stagnation from Erickson socio-emotional development. Okay, lastly, aging. Okay, so aging is basically the stage when people are reaching late adulthood. Okay, late adulthood. So at this stage, Erickson's focus on the issues of integrity versus despair. Okay, from Erickson perspective, the person who has entered lives in their later years, okay, in the late adulthood, they are engaged in the experience of looking back, okay, experience of recalling what they have done in their life. Okay, while looking back, okay, doing this memory lane adventure through memory lane, for examples, people at this stage are basically evaluating, okay, evaluating his or her life, okay, seeking meanings and coming to terms with their end or with their death. Erickson called this eighth and final stage of socio-emotional development as integrity versus despair. What is integrity? Integrity, the individual experiences life as a meaningful, okay, meaningful life and coherent whole. So he or she faces the later years with a strong sense of meaning and low fear of death. Okay, so they feel satisfied with what they have done in their life, and they basically do not have high fear or afraid of death. Okay, on the other hand, despair. The older adults at this stage that is filled with despair and fear if basically they are regretting whatever life experience they have done. So the meaning of life derives from both the past, also the present at that particular age. So in terms of social relationships, when we reach late adulthood, okay, older adults becomes more selective. Okay, they are not open to everything. This is the stage that they are more selective about their social networks, who are their friends, okay, who they are mingle around with, okay, who are in their community. At the same time, older adults report higher level of happiness than their younger counterparts when they be more selective. Okay, there is no time for them to waste with toxic people. Okay, so at this stage, these older adults, their behavior can be explained. This selective behavior can be explained from socio-emotional selectivity theory. Okay, socio-emotional selectivity theory. So based on this theory, it explains people of this age behaviors, okay, a narrowing of social context and increase in positive emotion. They're no longer dealing with everyone, okay, in their environments. Instead, they are selective about people that they want to be close with, their friends. Okay, why? Because they value their happiness and times more at that particular stage. Okay, why? Why they have positive emotion based on this socio-emotional selective theory? Because for them, time is limited. Okay, older adults derive meaning from satisfying relationship and activities at the present time. Okay, They no longer think about a long-term plan or what they are going to do in the next 10, 15 or 20 years. They value there and then, okay, the present time. So socio-emotional factors influence their physical as well as their mental health as well as vice versa. Okay, if they don't have a good socio-emotional levels or state, it will have negative impacts on their physical as well as emotional health. So those are all important stages and aspects in socio-emotional developments of a person. So we've discussed since infancy, childhood, adolescence, emerging adulthood, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and just now, late adulthood or aging. So most of our discussion based on Erikson's 8 stages of socio-emotional development. Okay, there are some other supplementary or complementary theories and concepts. So let's look back at the Erikson theory. Okay, let's evaluate the contribution, the strengths, and some limitation of Erikson theory. In terms of strengths, okay, Erikson theory emphasizes on development of a lifelong process. Okay, they not talk about one particular time. Okay, adolescence only, childhood only, or during adulthood only. It's basically from infancy until death. Okay, aging, late adulthood. So there is an important ideas about the central themes that often occupy human life at various stages of development. Okay, for example, in adolescence, adolescents are occupied with their issues of trying to establish their identity. So identity versus identity confusion. Okay, so these are all important central themes. Okay, Erikson called it as central themes, important crisis or developmental tasks that people have to address, to fulfill in each of the developmental stage. So those are the strength of Erikson theory. But at the same time, there are some criticism addressed towards Erikson theory. For example, most of the concepts, most of the developmental tasks, most of the crises that Erikson introduced relied heavily on case study research. Okay, so we are limited with the case studies design. Okay, and it is a noticeable in Erikson theory. There are some important aspects that have been left out. Okay, he left out some other important developmental tasks. Okay, when discussing about socio-emotional development stages. Okay, for examples, dealing with careers and work. Okay, we acknowledge that when you are reaching early adulthood towards middle adulthood, career is one important aspect of life. Okay, like I mentioned before, is two important factors in midlife crisis: marriage as well as career change or career crisis. But that aspect has not been discussed by Erikson in his socio-emotional stages of development. And lastly, little exploration of emerging adulthood. Like I mentioned, just in this aspect, socio-emotional developments, they talk about the key features and they talk about how people are basically transitioning from adolescence to early adulthood. But not much have been discussed on this period or these stages of life. It's also considered as one of the criticisms of Erikson theory.